let me start with some breaking news that just came up a couple of hours ago. And let me see if I could pull it up here. It involves, let me talk about this guy right here. This is Robert Morris. And the last time I talked about this guy may have been several months ago. But in case you need a primer on this guy, I'm talking about him because he just pleaded guilty to a very serious charge. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the thing you need to know about Robert Morris is that he's a very powerful evangelical Christian. When Donald Trump was trying to convince conservative Christians to support his presidential campaign in 2016, which there was a time when that wasn't a given, he released a list of his evangelical executive advisory board. Guess what? Robert Morris was on that list. And in fact, later on in the White House, as you could see right here, Robert Morris, right over there, he is one of these dudes who's in the room when everyone's putting their hands on Trump. But Morris is a sort of evangelical Christian who thinks his prayers can cure infertility, which is not how it works. He says it's scientifically impossible to be an atheist, which is news to everybody. He says trans people are a threat to children, and that's one you're going to want to remember in just a second when I tell you what he did. But in any way, what happened is that a few years ago, actually I should say like in 2024, a website called the Wartburg Watch, which is kind of a watchdog group for what happens in Christian culture, they shared a story from a woman named Cindy Clemishire. And I can say her name because she's gone public with all this. And Cindy's story was that in 1981, when she was only 11 years old, Robert Morris at the time was just a traveling evangelist. And he was visiting Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he met her family. And Robert Morris and his wife and his son, they ended up staying a lot of times with Cindy's family. They became very close. Well, Cindy said that on Christmas Day in 1982, the families had known each other for about a year at this point. Robert Morris allegedly invited Cindy to come to his bedroom, where he proceeded to do very bad things to her. And then he told her, quote, "Never tell anyone about this because it will ruin everything." And she was a little girl at the time. She did not know any better. One of the reasons Robert Morris was able to get away with this, because it kept going for years, is he told his wife he was counseling the little girl. So this continued for years until like 1987. And at one point, Cindy told a friend of hers what had happened. News got back to Cindy's father, and the father was thankfully just furious at Robert Morris. He told him, get out of the ministry. So Robert Morris stepped down for 2 years, just went away. And when he finally returned to preaching, he started up a church that became known as Gateway Church. And this is where he became famous later on. It wasn't until Cindy got much older that she kind of realized the way she had been victimized, what he had done to her. And this is what the Wartburg Watch said that I want to share with you here. In 2005, she obtained an attorney to file a civil lawsuit. Robert Morris's attorney responded by implying that they believed it was her fault because she was flirtatious. She was 12. She asked for $50,000 for this NDA, and they responded that they would give her $25,000, but only if she signed an NDA. She refused, so here she is telling her side of the story. That's why we know any of this happened, because Robert Morris and his lawyers thought they could shut this girl up. And listen, I'm not going to go over every detail about what happened because I've made a video about this. I will link it down below. But basically, what that statement said, it's appalling for so many reasons. One being that Morris's attorney was blaming a child for like luring him. She was 12. She cannot legally consent. She was not flirting with him. What the hell? Anyway, when the Christian Post media outlet asked Robert Morris, hey, do you have any comment about these pretty damning allegations against you? This is what Robert Morris told the Christian media outlet. When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady, she was 12, in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years. But don't worry, everyone. Look down here. Since that time, I have walked in purity and accountability in this area. And then, you guys, he went on to say that he left the ministry for 2 years because Cindy's dad basically told him to. And when he returned, look at this, 2 years after his abuse was exposed, with the blessing of the survivor's father and the elders of his church. That's when he came back. He got the okay from Cindy's dad. He further noted that he and his wife met with Cindy and her family in October of 1989. I asked their forgiveness, and they graciously forgave me. That sounds weird. And if that sounds weird, it's because it definitely did not happen. In fact, the Christian Post reached out to Cindy, who said none of that is true. The survivor made it clear to the Christian Post that Morris did not get her father's blessing to return to ministry. My father never ever gave his blessing on Robert returning to ministry. My father told him he's lucky he didn't kill him. I'm mortified that he's telling the world my dad gave his blessing. Of course, we forgive because we are called to biblically forgive those who sin against us, but that doesn't mean he's supposed to go on without repercussions. Okay, so that's where the allegations came from. This goes on. The church says we're going to investigate it. They insist. The elders at the church say, "You guys, we didn't know any of this happened." Even though Robert Morris is like, "I told everybody what happened, and they believe I am pure now, and that's why I'm allowed to be the senior pastor of Gateway." So all this and Gateway Church elders are like, "We didn't know any of that. We didn't know she was 12." But they do an investigation. The church eventually removes several elders who absolutely knew that this girl was underage, but didn't do anything about it. But in any case, it's been 35 years since all this happened, and there was an open question of, he's a really powerful white Christian pastor. Is anything seriously going to happen to this guy? Because, he's a conservative. There are very few repercussions these days if you're a white Christian who breaks the law and you happen to be a friend of the Trump administration. You know what I mean? So, the irony to all this is Robert Morris has spent years preaching about sexual ethics and sin. Uh, he promoted Donald Trump, who did all the things Morris urged people not to do because Christians love hypocrisy. But what was interesting in the last time I talked about this is that because all this happened in Oklahoma, even though Gateway Church is in Texas, because the abuse happened in Oklahoma, there was an investigation in Oklahoma from that state's Republican attorney general. And guess what? The grand jury heard the testimony and they indicted Morris on 5 counts. Specifically, what they said, and I can show you this, I've read this before, it is disturbing stuff, but here you go. The indictment said on December 25th, 1982, he touched very private areas of this 12-year-old girl. December 27th, 2 days later, he removed her clothes and looked at those areas in a lewd or lascivious manner. Then between weeks in January after that, he touched those areas again. Sometime over the next 2 years, he touched the girl's areas in a lewd or lascivious manner while parked in a car. And also, over those next 2 years, he touched her by removing her clothing and rubbing his body, including his private parts, covered by his clothing against her body, including her leg, while parked in a car. So that is what the grand jury indicted him for. It was horrific. Clemishire, by the way, she's in her 50s now. She's a grandmother, but there was some semblance of justice that this guy got indicted. And the question is, what happens now? Well, what happened after that indictment is that they could pursue charges on this guy. And the charges said he could face jail time. He could face lots of it, up to 100 years behind bars, because it was like 20 years for each of those felony counts against him. Or because of who he is and how powerful he is, it was very possible he could get nothing. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because just this afternoon, this is the headline that I saw. Robert Morris, Texas megachurch pastor, pleads guilty to abusing a child. And specifically, there's a couple things I want to show you here. I'll scroll down past the description of everything. At his first court appearance in May, Morris pleaded not guilty and was released on a $50,000 bond. Last month, he waived his preliminary hearing, a signal that his defense team and prosecutors were engaging in plea negotiations. And today, those talks ended with a guilty plea from Robert Morris. Okay, so the question you're wondering is, okay, is this guy actually going to get punished? He's pleading guilty. What's going to happen to him? I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but here's the news. I'm going to skip down here. Oops, I skipped the important part, which is right up at the top. Let me jump right there. Here we go. Robert Morris entered the plea, and under a negotiated plea agreement, he was given a 10-year sentence, but he's only going to serve 6 months in the county jail. He must also register as a sex offender and pay $250,000 in restitution. So, at the end of all this, everything I just told you, this guy will spend about 6 months in jail, and he's a registered sex offender, and he has to pay some money, but honestly, $250,000 for a guy like him, that's probably nothing. It's 6 months. And the reason I say I don't know if this is good or bad is because I was seriously worried the alternative was he would do no time in prison. Because as far as we could tell, it's not like this was one victim, but there are many more who have not spoken up. As far as we know, this is the only person he has victimized. So maybe that's the reason for this plea deal. Also, the fact that this guy is now a registered sex offender, he's not going to be able to get a job at a church, you would think, but you never know. These guys will go away for a few months. Who knows? After 6 months, Robert Morris comes back, does one of those I'm forgiven by Jesus tours, and then starts up a new church somewhere else. That could happen. But at least there is some justice in the sense that if you think the alternative was doing nothing, well, here's a guy who's going to go to jail now. And, that is more than you could expect in a lot of these cases. And the fact that, this guy's in the news everywhere, he can't really get away from this. This part really, the tears will spill when you read what Cindy said in court. In a prepared statement, Clemishire told Robert Morris in court his abuse rippled into every part of her life, straining relationships, damaging her marriages, and affecting the way she raised her children. She said she prayed that God helped him to understand the depth of the pain he inflicted. Morris's eyes were fixed on the table in front of him. He's not even looking at her, as Clemishire, speaking through tears, faced him during her remarks. Let me be clear, she said, there is no such thing as consent from a 12-year-old child, which is apparently a thing that prominent white evangelical pastors don't know. We were never in an inappropriate relationship. I was not a young lady, but a child. You committed a crime against me. And then her sister, Karen Black, also said, you pretended to be holy, preaching from big pulpits. As you hid behind your facade, we've known you are nothing but a predator. So, this guy's going to jail for 6 months. I do find it interesting that in the midst of all of this, there was other stuff happening. Earlier this year, Robert Morris sued Gateway. He sued the church, saying they owe me millions of dollars in retirement money, alleging that the church mishandled his resignation and damaged his reputation. Just think about what's the word for that sort of statement? This man, who is now an admitted sexual predator and registered sex offender, is like, hey, church, when you said you had to get rid of me for, reasons, you hurt my reputation. My dude, you hurt your reputation. Gateway has denied Morris's claims, saying his demands do not reflect accountability for the impact of his actions on the community, but that lawsuit is still pending. By the way, I think there's another lawsuit against Gateway Church from former members who say their tithe money was used inappropriately. I don't know the status of that particular lawsuit right now. But here's the good news. There's some justice for all the people. I mean, the courage it took for Cindy to speak out after all these years, after hiding it in for decades, and then to speak out publicly and use her name when doing it, and to see the Oklahoma Attorney General pursuing these charges, and for a grand jury to indict him, and for a judge now to oversee him pleading guilty to this. Huge. That is huge. You rarely see that when it's deserved. And again, we can argue about that jail sentence is not long enough, but I feel like we should not be comparing 6 months to like the potential of 10 years behind bars. I think you got to compare 6 months to the very real possibility that he might have spent no time in prison. So I don't know. The 6 months almost seems symbolic, but it's something. It is meaningful. He should not have any sort of public life after he's out of jail. So I will stop there for now. I just wanted to bring that to your attention because it just happened as I was heading home today to get ready for this. Any questions here before I move on to a different story? A travesty of justice. I mean, the fact that he wasn't convicted for so long, the fact that he could build his career and become so close that the future president is calling you for advice, that should never have happened. So again, is it a travesty, or the fact that something happened counts as justice in some way? At this point, I'll take what I can get, and I'm not even affected directly by this story. Well, at least people will know the truth now about him and can't deny it. And I agree with you, and I hope that's true. And at the same time, I also think, whatever, everyone knows the truth about Donald Trump, and a bunch of idiots still voted for him last time around. So, when, again, with a certain type of people, the sort of people who attend white evangelical churches, there is nothing you can do that you can't follow up with by saying, God forgave me, and then they'll forgive you. Like, what does it take for these people to realize you're a monster? Because Trump has done everything that's bad, and they don't have the values to know that. So, I mean, yeah, the truth is out there. You can't deny it, but I feel like that only applies to people who actually care about facts and justice and things like that. And I don't know that a lot of white evangelicals do right now.